All right, so let's get started. We're talking about the Media and Entertainment Data Center Alliance. And Sean, you and I spoke probably about 4 months ago. I know you've done a lot of work in the background, and ultimately I should give you both a chance to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your work and your what you do. So Sean, you want to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. My name's Sean Tukowski. I've been in entertainment for about 33 years. I've worked in and out of both on the camera side as well as technical side for years. Started to notice about 20 years ago how our group had been changing over to kind of data-centric workflows. It was right around when HD started up, and started to dive pretty heavy into telecommunications at that time, data-centric workflows and such. And that's kind of where I landed into the data center field, especially specifically in entertainment. Matt, want to
Actually, I would add to that, Sean, also. So Sean, you keynoted HITS in 2018, a HITS fall session. And we talked about some of these very same subjects back then. So we have history, and again, that was a great presentation. I think it was also like the audience was a little stunned because if you gave that presentation right now, everybody like ding, and all the bells would go off. It was so prescient. So just want to thank you again for doing that, and know that we've got real history here. All right, Matt, go ahead. Please introduce yourself in IES.
Hi, I'm Matt Allen. I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Pre-Construction for IES. We're the largest specialty contractor in the communication space, and we build most of the folks that you guys were talking about in the last few sessions. So, if you're dealing with cloud providers, if you're dealing with social media type folks, we're there building their data centers for them, and helping them standardize and pushing that technology forward across that industry.
Awesome. And by the way, when you say some of those people, like, what are you obviously media and entertainment, but some of those fringe ones too. I mean, you do social, you do, yeah. I don't know, also, yeah. Hollywood's famous also for being like, you can't tell people that you're working with us, but yes, we're working. But any names you can name?
Yeah, we work for the companies that handle TikTok and Twitter, a number of others that I'm sure you've used throughout your day today.
So
maybe you searched for something that had to do with this, with this conference. You potentially use their data centers as your search platform.
All right, that's good to know. That's really good to know. And so glad to have IES here as well today. So thank you for joining. All right, we do have a deck, and I'm just going to share. I'm going to share the screen and throw this up here just to give a little bit of an overview. So bear with me. I'm usually not the room host. Okay, here we go. So the Media and Entertainment Data Center Alliance. Let's start looking at some of these and use this as a drive, right? So why MEDCA? We actually said this in the last session, and Matt, you were listening. One of the things they said was like, friends don't let friends build data centers, right? And I caveated, said, friends don't let friends build data centers without standards, best practices, and some guidance around this. But let's talk through this slide a little bit. When people hear data center, we're going to talk a little bit about types of data center, but why do we need data centers and why do we need MEDCA?
Go ahead, Matt.
That's a great question. So we need data centers because there is a significant amount of compute required to do these tasks, anything from liking a cat picture to post-production of an animated short. All these things require massive amounts of data and compute. So we keep those compute environments and in very specific places. They're essentially giant warehouses full of computers, kept at the proper temperature, kept in the proper environment, in order to ensure that they run at their most efficient and for the longest period of time that they can. We bring giant pipes full of data back and forth between those out to smaller data centers within regions, within municipalities, and within studios.
We talked a little bit about the connected ecosystem of cloud, sorry, on the last session as well, and that idea of also private, hybrid, and public cloud. But all that stuff runs on data centers, really, right?
That's right. That's right. And they're all various versions of data centers, frankly. So, private cloud is often a small data center located on a premise, and then that goes out to a public cloud, which can be, varying levels of distance away from that end user. The big buzzword these days is the edge. So we're pushing these compute environments as close as we can to our end clients.
So Guy, let's go to that next slide and I'll kind of talk about how that pertains to the right
This
there.
one?
Yeah, to the M&E space. So it's very interesting. We think of data centers as more of what we call hyperscale, aisles and rows and those big block houses or very large warehouses. But that's not really the case. A data center is everything all the way down to a single server and just a 25 RU or even an 8U rack. It's anything basically that's in a rack that's serving data. And some of the edge, you'll start to hear a lot more about edge. For instance, over at Crafty Apes, which we had built, they're doing a very unique thing, especially when COVID came. Not only did they use it as more of an on-prem solution, but and there are only 4 racks. Those 4 racks are actually a data center, and it's becoming even more so as a data center because they're actually using Teradici and serving all of their artists around the United States and into Canada. And so even though it's not a hyperscale facility that you're used to, data centers are all the way down to a single rack if needed. But in the case of what they're doing is it's really edge data center. They're doing on-prem compute, doing a lot of rendering on-premise, and then they're also linking to the public cloud. And so that's what we consider an edge data center, something that's serving the edge, serving a local area or a metro area, and then working with the hyperscale and the rest of the infrastructure worldwide. So from the slide, hyperscale, large data centers, edge, it's that on-prem solution along with public or private clouds. Medium, that could be a smaller data center, a lot like what Fox and a couple of other people have within their facilities. A smaller data center would more be like what we'd see in facilities like Crafty Apes or which is a visual effects house, or some other visual effects house like DFT and those groups. And then touring racks, we're starting to see data centers being required on set. It's funny, about 10 years ago, I couldn't even get a computer on set practically. And now we're seeing, with virtual production, this explosion of on-set materials. Now, some of this is in touring racks where it has to come and go out of these stages. And some of the stages are purpose-built as smart sets. And in that case, it would be a small data center. And actually, I would consider that an edge data center, wouldn't you, Matt, since they're working with on-prem and exterior as well?
Absolutely. Edge is just as close as we can possibly get it to the end user. So on-prem, on-set, as small and as local as possible.
Yeah.
So and gentlemen, so take a sound stage, right? So take an LED sound, but doesn't even have to be LED because so much data. We talked about data, processes, but where would that fall in here? Is that a small data center when you talk about something that's on a sound stage driving that?
That's interesting. So it can be, again, temporary, where it's an existing stage that's not what we call a smart stage, so therefore touring racks and so on and so forth. Or it could be a fixed, purpose-built sound stage. These newer sound stages that are going up, they have to be smart and they have to be connected. So you would be considering a smaller stage. Yeah, that's a good example in the background.
Sorry, looking at that from a picture perspective, I was popping back here also to say that, we should talk a little bit, and I know we only have a few minutes, but yeah, we should talk about data-centric processes and this OSI model. So that's why I thought this is a good example, and you can speak to the picture as well as to the language.
Absolutely. So the one thing about this first part of this slide is, in most businesses, we don't build, let's use construction, for instance. If you were building a house, you would not build your stick frame or your metal frame building and then do the drywall and dry it all in, put a roof on it and finish it all out, and then put the concrete. You have to build from a foundation up. And one of the things that we find in the entertainment area is we're always concentrating on process and not necessarily the foundation. The foundation is last. And that's that's like building a facility and putting the foundation last. It's very, very important. And it's actually part of the OSA model, which is the computer model, which is an industry standard worldwide, is to start with what's called layer 1, the physical infrastructure, which is your foundation. And if you don't have a good foundation, the rest of the process most likely won't work. Just like if you built a building and you didn't put a foundation under it, most likely it would fail. So that's a good analogy in that. The other thing that someone, Eric Rigney, actually mentioned to me is he said, what's the other thing about when you build a building, what happens first? Well, the client goes to the architect, yes, but then the architect has to deliver those to the city. It's governance. And there, in our case, our standards and practices body is our governance body. And it's very important when you build something that you do it to a standard and you do it to a code, because it will catch up to you.
Yeah, and Matt, you work a lot on the, obviously, if you're building these ginormous data centers that we're all using pretty much all day, every day. I mean, you're very familiar with the telecom and data center industry standards, right?
Absolutely, and I'm actually intimately familiar with the background of this slide. So if you were to just lean sideways, you'd probably see the IES logo. So this is a particularly interesting look at what I think is an on-prem edge data center. So what you can't tell by looking at that picture is that all of our company's data is served from those racks. So we centralize all of our engineering drawings, all of our data, everything that we do, contacts, you name it. And they're in servers and storage units that are right there inside inside those 8 racks that we have. So yeah,
that's a data center.
That is a data center.
Yep, it is indeed. Any one of those racks would be a data center, to Sean's point. But you're absolutely right though, Guy. The TIA and the IEEE and groups like 24/7 and the Uptime Institute, these are the folks that have been spending the last 20 years perfecting how to make reliable energy efficient, and so we follow those standards every single day. I have copies of those standards on my computer and on my desk, wherever I happen to be in any given moment. So,
well, it's interesting. There's a parallel also here, because we've just gone through this in the security space. We just released, I'm the CEO of the Trusted Partner Network and the president of CDSA. We just released a standard that basically took, all the best bits of ISO and CIS and, all these various security standards, right? CSA, Cloud Security Alliance. And we just said, all right, we're going to adopt your standards and narrow them so that they're absolutely perfect for our industry. And then maybe 1 or 2 extra controls that are totally unique to us. But the bulk of what we've released, the 1,000 controls or whatever it is, it's just basically other people's standards. And, the reception of that was so strong, of saying, this is the way to do it. These standards that they work on in the telecom and the data space, also, they're extensible. They're constantly revising them and keeping them current. So the idea of us developing our own standards and saying, oh, these are ours, it seems silly. So that's another thing that, from a dovetail perspective, when we talk about this first deliverable, right, I think what we're trying to establish is kind of a beachhead, saying, hey, don't start from scratch and take advice from somebody that's not looking at the actual standards for data center building. And I don't know if Sean, if you want to talk a little bit about this first deliverable and where we're going.
The last thing on that is, 20 years ago, we entered the telecommunications space. 90% of our workflow right now is data centric. And so those are well-established standards, and there's well-established codes in regards to those. So we're not actually making up new standards for M&E. What we're doing is consolidating them to the things that are specific to our industry and not necessarily other buildings or business type related products. And we're having the manufacturers validate our findings. And since they're all sit on the standards body, they're doing what we call, we're creating a, my apologies. They're just validating basically what we end up coming together.
Basically peer review is with experts rather than peer review of us who are on the Hollywood side.
Positioning paper, my apologies.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
What's interesting to me, guys, that to me, it's almost like creating a Rosetta Stone. So, we have these established industries that have these established standards, and we have another established industry that is doing the same type of work. It's mostly a matter of translating and connecting the language of those 2 industries together so that both sides can see, well, we really are doing roughly the same thing. Sure, the output's not the same, but data is data. So, these standards that you're talking about, these bespoke standards for this industry, for the M&E industry, it really becomes more of a Rosetta Stone instead of a reinvention of the wheel, since the wheel is.
I totally agree. And again, sorry to cut you off. We're having a little internet jitter as well. But I think the other thing is we're faced with an explosion of work, and we have to go build a lot of these things. And I think ultimately we want to give a little bit of a blueprint or some best practices or some ideas, so that as we're building these, we don't just build them sillily and build them stupidly and waste time, money, and get that low quality latency and throughput from building it improperly. I think that's the
Correct.
overarching goal.
Hey, Guy, could I end with one thing? We just had a facility or a stage do a project and they hooked up to a generator. We all know that with GPUs and all these more sensitive equipment, as we get faster and we start using really sensitive equipment, it starts to again be, the data center is a controlled environment, controlled electrical, controlled air conditioning, things like that. So we have to start following a little bit of those practices as we increase our data throughput. So if you're building for today and it's working, that's great, but you're not building for tomorrow and you're going to find that out the wrong time. We had a stage that basically hooked up to this unit. The power's dirty from the lights, the HVAC and those types of things. They lost a day and a half of data. This was a test program, so it was okay. But you can imagine if we did that on a film, on an actual shoot, and we lost an actor that was only available for 5 days, that would be pretty substantial to a to a production. So that's a good example of why standards and practices in this type of activity is important.
Well, it's risk management ultimately,
Correct.
These are big risks. All right, look, we're out of time. I knew this was going to be brief, but we planted the flag in the sand for MEDCA. And I also look at this as we're going to work fast and furious to try to get these best practices out as quickly as possible so that people aren't fumbling around in the dark. But I thank you both for the work you're doing behind the scenes on this, and look forward to working with you and establishing this as a media and entertainment standards body, industry body, and advice center. So thank you. I appreciate both of your time.